Welcome to the Road Home podcast with Ethan Nichtern. Join Ethan as he and his guests explore the Buddhist path as it relates to art, culture, activism, politics, Western psychology, and more. If you'd like to support Ethan's podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/Ethan.
All right. So hi everybody. Welcome to the Road Home podcast. I'm Ethan Nichtern. I can say this without it being hyperbole. I'm here with actually one of my favorite artists, writer, performer, poet, actor, Sarah Jones, which is really cool that you want to be on the Road Home podcast. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you for having me here. How could I possibly resist coming on the road home? It's what we're all seeking. I mean, come on, Ethan. This is great. And you don't know this, or maybe you do. I once encountered you at the Shambhala Center on 27th Street in New York. What was it called now? I can't remember. The Insight Meditation Center. Was that right?
It could have been one of those two places. The Shambhala Center used to be on the 22nd Street, and the Insight used to be in 27th Street.
I'm getting my Murray Hill, whatever that area is, my Flatiron District.
The Meditation District.
Meditation District experiences mixed up. But I remember there were several teachers, and I thought, that guy feels like a real person. Not that anybody else didn't, but I remember thinking, I don't have to ascend to, some kind of monastic perfection to do this. He feels like a real New Yorker who might get on the train after this. And it was part of what helped me become more of a seeker. So thank you for your work. I'm
pretty sure I did get on the train after that. So there wasn't even performance. But so I usually ask for people's origin stories, but I'm going to talk more about it for people who aren't familiar with your writing and acting work. But do you want to tell how did you get in? When was the first time you meditated? I'm wondering.
So I can tell you a lot of things, probably in a lot of voices, in hopefully a reasonable amount of time, by letting a couple of my voices come through. So I play people of lots of different backgrounds. And if folks aren't familiar, you're not looking at me. But one of my first characters was a lady, an older lady. Hi, Ethan. Nice to see you, sweetheart. My name is Lorraine. And Sarah put me in a show, what she called a one-woman show. And you know what that means, of course. It means she takes the credit and makes us come out and do all the work, all her characters, she calls us. Anyway, Sarah comes from one of these multicultural families. And when she was a little girl and things were topsy-turvy in her house, we say that to be nice. When things were topsy-turvy, she would go into a place in her mind and be other people. And I think that's the first time she meditated was when she focused enough on another voice to kind of travel in that way in her mind to a place and concentrate on that place. So that's one theory, is that my characters themselves were my first experiences of meditation when I was really little. And it was from, interacting with my Black and white and mixed and Christian and Jewish, surroundings, and Dominican and whoever else was in my family or in the house was sort of pouring into me. And unbeknownst to me, they were kind of taking up residence, and they were this refuge. Now I have a cushion, but then I just had this place I could go. I don't want to call it an escape. It was like a portal onto another place that felt more restful than my life.
So, and we were just talking before starting the recording. The first time I heard of you was that my friends were going to this amazing one woman, one person show, which was here in New York's East Village, PS 122. And it was called Surface Transit. And I think in that show, did you play 7 different? Somehow I have the number 7 in my head. Like there were 7 different characters, completely different, just like Lorraine, just inhabiting completely different. So, I mean, how did you just get the idea for a one-person show? I mean, that's a lot of energy on multiple levels, a lot of writing work, a lot of performing work, like, all parts of it.
Yeah, there were a lot of layers. I would say that I was born for it, though. I almost don't, I'm learning to take credit for hard work that I did. At the same time, when I was little and just kind of starting to filter, these voices were just filtering in. And I should say, I not only come from a multiracial and multi-ethnic family, but also an interfaith and all the other things. I also went to the United Nations school, and I grew up in Queens. So it was like, when I got on the bus or the subway, there was a lady standing here. She's Russian. She's speaking Russian. She's talking with her accent to this lady. And the next lady is sounding like my relative. She's, from Trinidad, and she's talking like this, and they're communicating with each other, and you're just feeling this music all around you, right? So I could not help but receive that. It was like an automatic thing. So I almost feel like, asking me when I started this is like asking the fish, when did it first start swimming in the water? The water was there, and it have to swim to live. So I almost feel like my origin story around the writing and the layers was baked into me as much as I then realized it was there and started to cultivate it in a more intentional way. But I was always, just steeped in all these other voices, and I felt connected. I felt much of my life, because, my mother looks basically somewhat like you, Ethan, in terms of like racially, she has white skin privilege and all of that, but I didn't feel any different. She's my mother. So I felt totally bonded and connected to this person who the world saw as different and separate from me. And I think that primed me to always feel connected to everybody, no matter what they looked like or sounded like. And I would say that when I did Surface Transit and I did characters like, there's a lady in Surface Transit, she live on the street. Now we would say unhoused. That's the right term for it. But, in the show, she homeless. That's what you call her. And she was based on real lady I saw in the subway on my way, traveling around. And yes, it was a lot of energy, but not as much energy as being broke and poor and having to beg on the subway platform, I could tell you that. So I think I sort of felt privileged to only carry these spirits and energies for my, 3 or 5 minute monologue, and that it was almost like a service to reflect back people who were traditionally non-existent, in any performance that I was seeing.
Mm-hmm. So with that level of your work, and then I want to talk about the evolution of your work, but like, the Buddhist concept of like self and non-self, really, that was one of the things, if we were going to have a Buddhist topic, that I was coming in with. But so I feel like on some levels, obviously, yes, as a straight white male New York City kid, like some levels, very different experience, but some levels, growing up in New York, feeling this symphony of voices, having a diverse group of friends, diverse group of, households that I was going to. So resonating, and, I think the piece of this that, was my formative experience was the empathy with, many different voices. However, I can't embody them the way you can. So when did you start to notice that you could actually shapeshift, energetically to actually manifest a completely different identity?
It's interesting. I was actually just getting to talk to Sharon Salzberg about this. And, like you, I love the way people who are really devoted practitioners and teachers of these Buddhist and Buddhist, understandings of the world, help me frame my own experience. I came to meditation the same way I came to my characters, out of need, out of seeking, out of a need for belonging, a feeling of feeling lost or lonely as a child, for multiple reasons, and none of which are the fault of anybody. I always, my parents did amazingly well with what they had. And like most people, there aren't just tools, healthy tools lying around for everybody to pick up and use in parenting, in communication, in life. And so I was, I think, seeking, like I said, an escape from my daily reality. I was like, I had an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. I was like an exhausted little kid. I was like an adultified child, latchkey kid, all of that stuff. And New York City, I mean, come on. I was riding the subway at 12 and like old men were hitting on me. It was a lot. So I think the feeling of being able to sort of merge myself into someone else's experience and to be able to imagine and embody their pain, almost like a Tonglen, right? Like that idea of I can deeply feel that there is no separation between another person's experience and mine. It was somehow easy for me to make the leap to physicality. It was somehow easy for me to say, if I can feel who they are, I can physically embody. I see that woman seems to have an underbite. So I'm going to stick my jaw out like this. I see she don't have no teeth on the top. If I pull my lip down like this, I could feel even more how she feel. And I could feel the hump, the dowager hump on my back and the stiffness in my shoulder. It was like an extension of the empathy that you describe. I just kind of carried it a little to the end of the line, if you will.
Yeah, all the way. Yeah. I just wanted to say for people listening, if you're not familiar with Sarah's work, just start off by going to sarahjonesonline.com to see some of the, because we don't have a visual podcast, but just the, not just the verbal and auditory, but the visual component of how she is able to do this. And so, I mean, there's a quality of that kind of work that it's magical. It could maybe be viewed as a little bit gimmicky. I don't know if anybody like that. It's, because it's like it could be viewed as a trick, But then after that show is my understanding is when it really started to take off with your one-woman show, Bridge and Tunnel. And then, that's when like Meryl Streep was basically your mentor. And there's a quote where Meryl Streep says you're a once in a lifetime artist. I mean, that's like basically Thich Nhat Hanh saying this person's enlightened. Like where do you go from there as an artist? Like Meryl Streep says you're a once in a lifetime artist and performer.
Oh, well, I thank you for lifting that out. I'm a little bit red in the face for those of you who can't see me, but it's, the answer to where do you go from there is twofold. You completely flip out and you can't get your jaw off the floor is one answer. And the other answer is, you go to lunch or you go get breakfast, right, or you go do whatever is the next thing that you have to do, because she said that about me, I think, in the same spirit as like it's such a, she wasn't saying it to set me apart. I mean, I think that she was saying it to affirm me. Mm-hmm. And that was an act of generosity and oneness. I think she was saying, I see you. Mm-hmm. And I really like the idea of, we don't have to elevate someone saying, I see you, to this impossible, wild, and it did make a difference. I mean, she amplified my voice from, a whisper to all of a sudden, like Robert De Niro was backstage in my dressing room and I was like, what's happening? And so I want to be, realistic about the world we're living in. But at the same time, for me, the most important thing I can do with accolades like that is put them in my bucket alongside the people who say, we don't like her. Or, this doesn't feel, I liked all the characters except this one. I get a lot of that. I get a lot of people saying, everything else you do is accurate and spot on. Wow. But why did you have to do, a Black woman who's unhoused or homeless? Why couldn't she be dignified, people will say? Or why did, a Latinx person have to be in the construction field? But there's all these interesting layers around class and, people assigning a moral value or a moral judgment to the people I'm creating. Right. And I found that that's what keeps me sort of, focused on what matters to me, which is my truth to the best of my ability through the prism of these people, many of whom are lending me their story. They're all based loosely on real, amalgamations of real people. Mm-hmm. But I guess what I would say is everybody's bringing their stuff to my characters, and that's as it should be. And so I accept somebody who says I'm the best thing, and I accept somebody who says I'm the least thing. And my job is to just know, is this the true thing? Is this what's true right now for me to the best of my ability? And do I feel like I'm honoring in that I see you spirit? Am I honoring this voice, this body that I'm sort of borrowing in the moment?
Right. But I mean, that seems to be the dilemma of writing any character, is that, for lack of a better word, a character has to be a stereotype in some way. It has to fit some kind of pattern in order to be able to describe, a situation that exists in the real world and bring that to light, right? So that it's that tricky thing about how are we using the generalizations that we make about people to illuminate something. I mean, I remember in your first show feeling like it was really illuminating in an urban environment. A lot of people you would overlook, right? That it was giving them the center and the voice, and that seemed to be so. In that sense, it wouldn't necessarily be people who have so-called dignity in our habitual way of looking at things.
Right, and I think the tricky part is who assigns dignity. Right? Who determines what dignity even means? I mean, if you really want to talk about dignity, it has nothing to do with, for example, having your family legacy get you into an Ivy League school where you have mediocre grades or, are of no service to anybody and maybe even harm people and then eventually ascend to an office in the highest, in the land and get to act.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
No idea who you're talking about. So I believe, I definitely could tell you, I'll let Miss Lady say, I have more dignity in my dirty little pinky fingernail than some people who would be called dignified. So we have to look at what does the meaning, what are we really saying when we say somebody is, above or whatever. And I've learned through my practice, anytime I'm believing in the illusion of hierarchy, I've just taken flight from myself. Mm-hmm. I've taken flight from the reality that we are an organism. Mm-hmm. Like this, there is no ladder here. There's a circle of humanity. And I kind of think the animals are above us. That's kind of my take on it.
That would be the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy version of spirituality, right? Yeah. So do you? I mean, that way of creating work, of like writing all the characters, creating a kind of coherent narrative, performing all the characters. Your more recent version of this is Sell By Date, right? It just seems like quite a lot of work. You also, I know, do sort of like just the acting thing too. I remember seeing you had a small role in the Netflix movie, Noah Baumbach movie, Marriage Story. Mm-hmm. Like that seems easier to me, that sort of way of being an actor.
Yeah, it seems easier to me too. That said, and who doesn't want to be in a Noah Baumbach movie? Who doesn't want to? I mean, I've had some really fun, Broad City, one of my favorite shows. I got to be on that in the last season before it ended, and fun. I mean, I got to be on Sesame Street. Who gets to do that, right? So those things are wonderful, and being able to shape a world that I think it is missing from the galaxy of what's out there is so rewarding. It is so gratifying to feel like, there's only one you, there's only one me in all of time, or however the Martha Graham quote goes. And I get to do my best to pull, to bring forward a conversation that isn't being had in any other place the way that I can have it. Mm-hmm. And if I can't do that, I don't like to do the work. If I'm, kind of recycling the same thing someone else is saying in the same way, I don't feel like that's a great use of my gifts. And so I'm not saying acting in other people's projects isn't gratifying and fun. I just did this Netflix show, which hopefully folks will be seeing soon, called On the Verge. And I love Elizabeth Shue, who was one of my heroes when I was, younger, and she was basically a kid herself too. It's nothing more fun than getting to play that way. Julie Delpy is the writer, director of this show. I've loved Julie Delpy since all the before sunrises, sunsets, before and after midnight and all the things. So that's wonderful because it's community. When you're a one-person show, it gets lonely. And like somebody said at an award ceremony one time, they were like, the next category is one-person show, or as we like to say, the loneliest cast party. It's a very specific discipline. I agree with that. I would say I like the balance now. There was a time when I was like, one-person show, this is all I can do. It's my words or nothing. And now I understand that one feeds the other. But I do like being able to, I really like being able to bring a lens that I would have missed. For example, when Whoopi Goldberg did her one-woman show and I was a kid, I looked at that stage and thought, oh my God, there's no one else. And she makes me feel like I have access. Mm-hmm. So I hope I get to do that for other people.
I want to shift into, talking about kind of the union of activism and art, but I have one more question, kind of performance related. Do you ever get nervous? Like, does performing make you nervous at all ever, or is it just go into it?
I would say I've been doing it so long that nervousness is not, it's sort of like, do you get nervous when someone asks you your name? Not really. Right. But if, I performed, it's so nice to be able to say this now. I used to have to say, I performed at the White House, not this one. And soon I'll be able to say, I performed at the White House, the Obama one, not the Biden one, which feels delightful. We're just going to skip that whole other interim period. But that was nerve-wracking in the sense that it was a room filled with, it's the White House, right? And it's the president and the first lady, and it was really heady. That was
they're intimidating.
They're a little bit intimidating. And then forget about the rest of the people in the room, right? It wasn't just them. It was like, oh, hi, Alicia Keys and Sheryl Crow and all these people I admired. And who I had to like open up for or, follow. I'm just going to quickly, Alicia's going to sing real quick and then I'm going to do my, and again, to kind of get back to that, Meryl Streep thing, we're all everybody puts their sequined pants on one leg at a time. In that world. And it did help me to remember they're probably nervous. So it's okay. Occasionally I'll have a moment like that feels like, ooh, let's not cause an international incident. Like, let's try not to improv and end up in the newspaper because we said something untoward at the White House. Those are the moments that I think where I don't feel total creative freedom to just let it fly because of the environment I'm in. But otherwise, I tend to feel pretty at home. I feel more nervous in the world. Like, oh my God, do I have to go to CBS? Oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to get through this?
Well, you live in LA now. It's not like Queens. LA makes me nervous too. I go there a lot, but it makes me nervous.
Yes.
Or I used to go there when we went places. So, all right, let's shift. This era that we are emerging from / moving into. So, your work has always been political, to my mind, it has always been political but would you say, I know you're starting this new company that's, it says socially justice focused entertainment company, which is such an interesting sequence of words, right, put together, but feels like a really useful sequence of words. So did we don't have to name his name, but has the illegitimate president era changed your approach to politics through your artwork? You are very political on your social media presence, et cetera, but I feel like you've always been political. So you're not like one of these artists who's just like woke up in October and said, oh, by the way, everybody register to vote, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. I would say because of my upbringing, because of, again, the kind of multiracial, multicultural, all of that, diversity isn't a buzzword for me. Like I wake up in this body every day. I am a walking reminder to America of centuries of misogyny and, anti-Blackness and, it's all right here. So for me, and it's interesting, I know I'm not the only person who thinks this way, and others have probably articulated it beautifully, but I don't believe there's any such thing as apolitical work. All work is political. It is all politicized by virtue of the fact that we, the people, we are the populace, we are the politic, the body politic. If I have the luxury of writing something that says absolutely nothing about the time I'm in, that says something about my politics and about my privilege, probably. I have yet to come across someone who is in a marginalized or, there's a person, I can't remember who exactly this is, but she uses, instead of saying marginalized, she says underestimated. So if you come from an underestimated group or community or religion or whatever that may be, it is highly likely that your work is going to be imbued with something about liberating those people, liberating ideas, decolonizing, ideas. That's just, you know what I mean? So I believe that Oklahoma is a political theater piece. Mm-hmm. It happens to be about the politics of manifest destiny. There's no Native American, let's really look at everything. Most work excludes people, more or less consciously. 12 Angry Men is certainly not 12 Angry Women. It's really interesting to look at all the work that we think of as neutral or as not activist work. And really, I'm not old enough to remember John Wayne movies per se, but I know that as a figure, John Wayne represents toxic masculinity, basically, but his movies were considered mainstream and wholesome and Americana. So we just kind of get to look at what we label political and apolitical or activist and non-activist. I would say that was white guy activism, cis, straight, male, violent activism. And it was very effective.
Well, we had a big Hollywood example of this last week with Matthew McConaughey. Again, going for this weird sort of symmetrical argument, but pretty much dumping on progressive people because I guess they are condescending as they try to get everyone healthcare, which I do agree that progressives can be condescending, but it's not to put people in cages. It's to try to stop wars and get people healthcare. So, it's an asymmetrical condescension, but then he claimed to be aggressively centrist, which is, the weirdest, it's the most telling self-owning phrase I've ever heard. I took it to mean conservative, but doesn't want to admit that he's a conservative,
Still wants to work in Hollywood.
Right.
I'm like, conservative, still wants to work in Hollywood, still wants to have his Latinx wife and not seem like a total contradiction. I just think that that's exactly what this is, for me, luxury. He has the luxury of, I think, having a misguided, I'm not attacking him as a human being. I just think that the combination of ignorance and false narratives about, rugged individualism and Pax Americana, people have bought into, the education system in America that teaches us this false binary, like you said, kind of moral equivalency. It's just not real. You don't say, well, let's hear from the Nazis on this. Thank you, Jews. We'd really love to hear and yet in this country, by default, Fox News was, there are good people on both sides. That didn't start with Trump. Right. I said his name. Poo. Anyway, so, I feel like people are going to do their best with the information they have. And we live in a society that is, I think, bolstered by maintaining ignorance, making sure we don't ever hear. If Matthew McConaughey knew that, first of all, he must know, or he reads, look, when you have a fourth estate that includes, when you have, Rupert Murdoch owning he's a mouthpiece that reaches most of America. And so we're hearing one conservative, and conservative isn't even the word. Conservatism isn't what these people are about. This is a kind of, it's just anti-humane. They're just not humane people. They're kind of like, children in cages is great for us. That's just way, way somewhere. And I think my point is Matthew McConaughey, the centrist thing, who was it?
Aggressively centrist.
Aggressively centrist. That's very important. You can't be neutral on a moving train. You can't be. And you can't be aggressively centrist on what really is keeling to the right. I'm sorry, but it's, are the Proud Boys condescending? Yes.
With their fists.
Exactly. They're condescending in a way that I would not want to meet any of them, not in a dark alley or even a brightly lit alley. So I think, again, this is about a larger problem of ignorance in our culture and a lack of history. People don't know what's really happened in this country, and they're hearing a filtered version around race and class and gender and immigration and all of these pieces that lets them say, frankly, I don't know if we can curse on your podcast, but really dumb, really aggressively dumb shit. Like I'm an aggressive.
I don't even think shit's a curse anymore. I think
it is. I think you can say it on like the Cartoon Network. I think you can say anything you want, anywhere you want at this point. Yeah.
My 3.5-year-old daughter sometimes says F and B. You can figure out what F and B is. But then she's started a preschool program this year. So she's like, we don't say that at school, because we were like, please don't say that at school. So she'll say it followed by, we don't say that at school. And we're just like, oh God.
That's perfect. That's the whole package right there.
But so then, like it does feel like there is something real happening that is actually like these large entities, the interest in, and it's hard to tell if it's superficial or it's deep, but, after June, after, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, like, I'm thinking of like, I'm a big basketball fan, and like the NBA did what looked like on the surface, this amazing job. And, the players who have, as much as I don't like LeBron James on the basketball court, I mean, he's somebody who's used this massive platform and has done like, quite a lot of activism. And it was, the Milwaukee Bucks and people like that really forced the NBA, which is a lot of billionaire white owners who also probably voted for Trump, the owners of these teams. But if you follow like the players and the coaches, they're very kind of more liberal / maybe progressive in their views. And it really looked like the NBA is starting to interweave a social justice message into this massive for-profit entertainment, scheme. So, I mean, what does that look like to run a like entertainment production company? Is there a way to do it deep, or do you have to sort of stay on the sides in an artisanal niche of people who care about such things? Or, I mean, is there a way that this could get as big as what Rupert Murdoch does? Like, could Netflix become a social justice company in the future?
I mean, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. I think if, those who are on the cusp, like you and me, and remember a Michael Jordan and how he was the opposite of a LeBron James in terms of political statements, right? So when, a Michael Jordan in the 90s was asked, will you please speak up just for a candidate, a squeaky clean Black candidate for, I think it was governor or something in maybe South Carolina, flat no, couldn't do it, didn't want to, or there was something around Republicans. It was something about like Nike, and, he didn't mess with his endorsement deals. He was very clear that he did not have any wiggle room to speak out about anything. And to fast forward to now, and I mean, we could look at the interesting, implications of billionaire white men owning these teams of Black men, right? I'm fascinated by that whole thing, the whole dynamic. And to think that maybe these institutions have no choice. It's about the will of the people. Like ultimately, this version of capitalism, part of the reason it's so nightmarish is that we, the people, have forgotten have not been encouraged to really stand in our power until something absolutely, unfathomably horrible happens on camera, where everybody can see. This has been happening. Knees have been on necks for 400 years, right? This is about a critical moment with COVID and the feeling of, wait a minute, this is all falling apart anyway. This doesn't feel just at so many levels. So many people are out of work and massive corporations get the stimulus. What the hell is going on? You add to that the layer of racial injustice, white supremacy coming to the fore. I think some of it will stick. I think it's a both and. It's not, is it deep or is it surface? It's both. And that's my job, is to kind of surf the waves that are shallow and do the best I can to find those deep pockets. And if my work isn't authentic, I'm not going to make it anyway. So my goal is partner with like-minded people wherever I can, and remember that we've had revolutions before, right? There was a Norman Lear. There was a moment in the 1970s when suddenly there was a burst of Black people on TV and Latinx people, and then Reagan came along. It wasn't one person, but there's always backlash. So I think if we study history, we know that the answer to your question is we don't know, but anything's possible. And of course, Netflix could, in spite of the 73 million people who were duped into thinking it was a good idea to have another 4 years of what we've been through. I believe if you actually educated those people instead of feeding them a steady diet of lies, they'd come around too. So the question is, how do you navigate that? And with corporations, it has to be, profitable. So we have to make activism very, very profitable.
Or non-activism very, very unprofitable or something. Yeah.
And we're getting a little of both, right? It's like, don't get canceled. That's not a good idea. Right. And I get it. I really get it about people being fearful around cancel culture. And at the same time, being Black in America is being canceled for 400 years. So we're just getting uncanceled now.
Yeah. So just to round out the conversation, like you're on Instagram. That's where I get the daily contact with you. Yes, I'm Sarah Jones on Instagram. But your Instagram feed it could be the feed of a well-known like meditation teacher or wellness influencer. Like you offer a lot of like self-care guideline. Like it's not that different the way you use Instagram from like the way meditation teachers I know use their feeds. So do you think of yourself as a wellness person too? I don't mean that in the really problematic, like anti-vax white way of.
Well, I'm sending you love and light. I'm just sending you love and light. No vaccines. Love and light. Yeah. I would say, first of all, thank you. That's high. That's a high compliment coming from you. I will tell you this funny story that's slightly embarrassing because I now, looking back 5 years ago, I went to the World Economic Forum, which is like saying, I took this lady, my character who was homeless, to Switzerland, where everybody was skiing and flying in on their whatever those planes are called, G5 or something. Anyway, I thought I'll be subversive. I'll go there and I'll, be the one voice around homelessness that anyone's ever heard at this, meeting of the world's elite. What was interesting was there were a lot of artists there, and I think we all had the same idea. And I had to, in order to feel sane myself in this, it's because it's confusing, right? My ego was like, let's just do a bunch of performances for these horrible corporations and go buy a house. I instead found myself teaching a meditation. I did a big meditation session with like CEOs of companies, and John Kabat-Zinn was in the audience. He was one of my first teachers. I bought his book, and I remember thinking, if I can do this, maybe I have a little bit of a teacher in me. And he said that was really good. He gave me a compliment. But people came away from that session saying, I really felt like you were a meditation teacher. So the truth is, if I sit long enough with you and Sharon and, Tara Brock and John Kabat-Zinn and everybody else, of course I'm going to absorb that and give it back as much as I can. It has saved my life. It has saved my career. And I want it to be available to everybody, just to know that basic goodness is your truth. It's who you are underneath all the layers and the noise. You're just, pretty amazing. So if I can tell that to people, even though we're on a platform that is also addicting us, doing my best with the balance.
What are you, as last question, as as we're coming out now of this, I think this will go live in early January. We're coming out now of the year of, I call it the year of the cosmic dumpster fire. How are you feeling about 2021? Are you optimistic? Do you feel like maybe, it's interesting when there's a trauma response, sometimes you just try to get back to the way things were as quickly as possible. But where do you see your own path going in 2021? Where do you see the world being like this time next year, in a worse place, a better place?
I think that one thing that helps me is remembering that the world has been, and I'll see your fantastic phrase about the dumpster fire and add Trumpster fire, which is my
cosmic Trumpster fire.
Cosmic Trumpster fire. So it has been a cosmic Trumpster fire, or fill in another, Reagan fire, whatever, for generations, for many people. There are just those of us for whom the bottom has never, risen to hit us. But I think of all the people sitting on death row, the people who were, sharecroppers, the people who were this has been an incredibly unjust society and world for a long time for a lot of people. And so I think the fact that so many of us with more power to influence, matters, the fact that we are awakening to it in a way that, yanks us out of that let them eat cake space into I'm willing to get into the streets. I'm willing to go through the difficult work of sitting with myself and asking what I can change. How can I be part of a solution? That's what's heartening for me, that it can travel rapidly via social media and via other platforms. And I hope by the time this is, live and people can hear it, you mentioned December 21st being this, the age of Aquarius. I am closing on a house on that day.
Wow.
This is my first home. And I have a lot of narratives about, we never got our 40 acres. I'm a reparations person. All of that swirling is going to land us somewhere. I think about the trans folks who've never, a documentary like Disclosure coming out. We are poised to wake up to our full humanity like never before. Will we heed the call, or will we all just, Netflix? And I don't know. But this time in 2021, I expect to be more fully myself than I've ever been, messier than I've ever been, and more joyful and probably silly than I've ever been.
That's a great way to leave it. And closing on a house is very stressful, I know. So congratulations, and hope it goes with as few obstacles from the external world as possible. And I just want to say, Sarah Jones, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been one of my very favorite episodes. And when people are seeing each other in person, I hope we can do this in the third dimension sometime.
That would be fantastic. And thank you for the compliment. I'm putting it in my bucket with my Meryl Streep quote.
Okay. Well, so ways you can connect with Sarah, go to her website, sarahjonesonline.com. She's at Yes, I'm Sarah Jones on Instagram. If you want to give Mark Zuckerberg more of your eyeballs.
Don't do that. Just give them to me and Ethan.
Yes. Okay. And On the Verge is your upcoming series on Netflix, which we don't have a release date yet, but
not just yet. We'll keep you posted.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's really been wonderful. And so until next time for the Road Home podcast, this is Ethan Nichtern. Everybody have a really safe and healthy January.